Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Tuesday webinar. I'm Liz Downey, e-commerce marketing manager of Takeometrics. I have got Sajag. We've been working on pronunciation. This guy is one of the most knowledgeable people in the industry, and I'm thrilled to have him here. He's the founder and CEO of Movly, which is a company that helps you make sure you're not cutting corners in the most important of your business, most important portion of your business, which is the creation of your products. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But I think that there are so many places where a seller or brand owner who's selling on Amazon can cut corners, and that can be disastrous for their business, because not only is it a pay to play, super competitive marketplace, but there are certain ways you have to do things in order to be compliant with Amazon's policies. And in addition to that, there is something called an order defect rate that you have to keep up with. Otherwise, you can lose your account altogether. So I thought that we could, well, first of all, a little bit of housekeeping. Questions are welcome. There's a little question section in GoToWebinar. You can pop your question there. We're going to have a couple slides in a little bit. Bless you. And we are going to do Q&A at the end, definitely. But if you've got questions related to what we're talking about right now, or you need advice on anything, just pop that question in the question section of GoToWebinar. And we'll be sharing our contact information in the chat, as well as any relevant links. And all of that stuff will also be in the show notes when we publish this after the fact. It is being recorded. It will be sent to all registrants. So that's all the housekeeping stuff. All right, so let's talk a little bit about a customer's journey when they buy something from a seller who has cut corners. So a customer gets a product that they ordered off of Amazon, and it either doesn't meet their expectations, it's packaged improperly, it's the wrong color, it smells bad, it's dangerous, it explodes. There are a lot of things that can happen. And then the result of that is that customer has a bad experience. That customer leaves possibly negative seller feedback, leaves a negative product review, and then that listing's rank drops. Their organic traffic is affected. Their ability to advertise can be affected if they lose the buy box.
Yeah, and it gets,
go ahead.
yeah, it's super troubling too, especially because when you got negative reviews and things like that, your listing starts to go down in the rankings. So if you have a lot of defects and problems, you might even have to re-rank your product. So it definitely can cause a lot of issues there.
Yeah, it definitely can. And there's so many things that could have gone wrong, right? Because at the very beginning of everything is the creation of your product, right? And that's where one of your areas of expertise is, because you're also a supply chain genius. But if
I call myself a genius, but thank you.
you're just really good with supply chain theory and practice. I've always been impressed by your logistics brain. But there are so many places at the very beginning where it can go wrong, right? So you've got your product is being manufactured maybe in a country where you don't speak the language. You've got your listing that's been created, but maybe it doesn't describe the item properly, or maybe you've done the wrong keywords in terms of advertising and nobody's seeing your listing. All these little places where you need to be very, very exact, and you need to be very diligent. It all starts with the actual creation of your product. But you can have a great product that's safe and exactly what you want it to be, but if you don't describe it properly in your listing, then you're still setting yourself up for negative product reviews. You're still setting yourself up for failure on the marketplace. So we've got people that obviously are geniuses at listing creation, listing optimization. We've got people who are great at advertising, and helping you choose the right keywords, finding out what your competitor keywords are, finding out who's ranking for the keywords that you're going for, all that kind of stuff. But we don't have a whole lot of people that will help you make sure your product quality is what it needs to be. So that's where Mavly comes in. I just want to be clear about that from the beginning because I think that what you do is very, very different from what a lot of companies do. And I just maybe take a second to just tell everybody like your philosophy and exactly what Mavly is.
Yeah, definitely. Really appreciate the intro, Liz. You're fantastic. When it comes down to kind of a little bit about just myself and Mobley, so a little bit about my background. So I was a former 2 million a year Amazon seller and selling in the electronic space. We also sold in a number of other industries as well. But essentially, I went through a lot of what we're talking about on this webinar firsthand with my products, with listing, with ads. So like, for example, we were advertising keywords that were not super relevant to our product. We still had sales, and then we had a lot of returns from those kind of keywords and those kind of sales. So it really ties together in kind of a cohesive strategy of how everything comes together. And the customer experience is kind of the root of that. So when I was running my brand, we had a lot of bad product quality. So we actually got super lucky initially. We had a lot of good quality that allowed us to scale the brand. And then a lot of our existing suppliers started to supply us with bad quality products. And we were not able to catch those problems. We were actually doing everything by the book. We had an in-house team in Shenzhen for a portion of time. We were working with third-party inspectors every product, every order, and we were still having defects on all of our products. And we were like, okay, why is this happening? So that's kind of what led to the creation of Mobley, where Mobley actually gives you a full service quality control team for the cost of an inspection. And it's a very different model when it comes down to how we operate, because what a lot of inspection companies do is they just send an inspector over to the factory. And the problem is if the inspector doesn't truly understand your products or how to inspect them, even the best inspector can send pass a defective batch of products. But when it comes down to the customer journey, I think what Liz was saying is really, really important to emphasize. The customer journey on Amazon, especially as you get more and more brands in the market, the way you're competing in the market is through reviews, it's through customer testimonials, and that's what's driving your rankings. You're running ads to create those rankings, and it's very important to protect your listing on an investment front. Because your listing is essentially an investment. So, once you put in money into your listing and you've spent money ranking it, building your keywords, optimizing it, running ads to your listing, getting the buy box, if you have other distributors on the listing as well. Once you've invested all that money, quality control is something that a lot of sellers skimp on, as well as advertising and things like that. And that's when you start having issues. When you start having negative reviews, you have returns, and you start having problems with your products. So we actually had to, at my previous brand, we actually had to relist several SKUs just because of product quality control problems. Like one of our products went from a 5-star to a 2.5-star product, and sales declined by over 80%. So it's pretty much impossible to sell a product once you have negative reviews.
That's a great point. I used to spend a whole lot of time talking about product reviews, but let's talk about, I'm going to share my screen and let's talk a little bit about returns too, because returns can happen for a bunch of reasons, right? They can happen because you've improperly described your listing. They can happen because you've targeted the wrong keyword, so people think they're buying one thing when they're really buying your product and that's not what they wanted. Or they can return it because it's bad somehow. It's the wrong color, it smells funny, it is broken, like exploded. I remember I ordered, I think it was hot sauce, and it was a 3-pack, and all 3 bottles were broken.
Wow.
And that's not like a manufacturing issue, but it's definitely a packaging issue. And how do you not leave bad feedback when that happens? I mean, luckily for me, I know the inside of things, and so I contacted the seller and said, hey, these were all broken, and they were like, oh gee, I'm sorry. I was like, well, maybe don't ship them in an envelope because they're made of glass. But there are mistakes that you can make all along the way. But we have these stats on returns that you guys put together, so if I can share my screen real quick.
Yeah, definitely. Let's jump into that. So there's some really interesting stats on returns and bad reviews, which really are really worthwhile sharing. So take a look at the return stats. So first of all, 20% of e-commerce returns are generally due to defective products, so product quality control, things like that. So if you're able to eliminate product quality control problems, from your listing, 20% decline on your return rate pretty easily. And that tabulates to about $41 billion in profits that are lost each year just due to a lack of returns on online purchases. And $82 million of profits are lost each year due to faulty or defective products. And what it really comes down to that is it's actually 82 billion, but get the mill and the bill mixed up. But when it comes down to an overall kind of rundown as far as kind of how that works, especially when you have like defective products and you file for a return, that return can eat up sales and your profits for multiple sales. So for example, on our products, we had about a $3 to $4 profit margin. We were selling low cost products. One returned unit would actually eat up profits from 3 to 4 sales, just because of COGS, losses, and other expenses associated with that return. And that's not even including customer damage, brand damage, or anything like that. So super important to know that. And if you take a look at the stats on bad reviews, Liz, if you switch over to the next slide there, please. When it comes down to the stats on bad reviews, it's actually really interesting. So 82% of shoppers specifically seek out negative reviews. And I'm sure a lot of you guys listening would also say the same thing. I do the same thing on Amazon as well. When I want to go buy a product, I go search up that product and I go look at the reviews, and I sort the reviews by worst to best. And I just read all the bad reviews and I'm like, what is possibly wrong with this product that I wouldn't want to buy it? And if the bad reviews are really, really bad, like, hey, this product exploded or whatever, I just need to read like a couple bad reviews, even if there's a couple hundred good reviews, and boom, I'm ready to not buy that product, because a lot of customers seek out fake reviews and things like that on Amazon. And fake reviews and things like that are common. So a lot of people just go straight to negative reviews. And the second thing is that generally when you look at average rates for Amazon shoppers, there's a big distinction when it comes down to review rates. In some products, you have 1% of Amazon shoppers that leave reviews. In other product categories, you have a higher percentage. So there's a huge impact that makes, especially when you have negative products. So say, for example, you have a customer who's unsatisfied with the product, they're 10 times more likely to leave a review. And based on some general research, it takes on average 40 good reviews to undo the damage of one bad review. And that's huge. So when you're selling on Amazon and things like that, and so for a lot of brands that are also selling in retail. So if you're selling on Walmart, you're selling on Target, a lot of shoppers go online and they go on Amazon to look at reviews, even if they buy that product at Best Buy, or they buy that product at Walmart. So Amazon is almost like an online reputation for your company and for your specific products. And that's something that's completely out of your control, that you have no way of controlling, taking down, or anything like that. And even contacting those customers, because Amazon makes it very, very difficult to do that. So it's incredibly important to protect yourself against those bad reviews and those returns.
It's absolutely true. I mean, when I was in the business of helping people get reviews, when I was with Ecom Engine, we used to say the average you can expect is 1 review per 100 orders. So if you're just launching a product, it's hard to get 100 orders to get 1 review, right? So then all of a sudden, if you've got 1 negative review, you're almost sunk before you can get started. It can be that disastrous to get negative reviews. And the return part of things, if we want to backtrack a little bit, train of thought. All of these are not only like negative things that can happen to you as a seller, but they also impact your performance metrics at Amazon. So Amazon is paying attention to this kind of thing. Obviously, it's a customer first, customer obsessed platform. So every time you get a return, every time you get a negative review, it goes into the Amazon's metrics of how you're judged and how your seller health is judged. So a big part of that, like the fundamental part of your seller health, is your order defect rate, right?
Definitely. And the other thing also to pay attention to is on the listing side and listing optimization. So a lot of sellers, when they first start out their business, especially in launching, they like to inflate their product features and things like that. And that can lead to a lot of problems. So, 20% of returns are due to defective products, but the other 80% of returns, a big portion of that is due to like undescribed products or products that, customers were, not satisfied with because they received, inaccurate information on the listing. So, for example, and this applies in ads as well. So we sold products with certain lengths on Amazon. So with some products, our lengths were 5 feet, and we would run keywords like, hey, 10 feet long product or 3 foot long product. And customers bought those products, didn't do any due diligence, and then they would write in the return reason, I thought the product was 3 feet. I thought the product was 10 feet, and did not actually do the diligence because we were running advertising on the wrong keywords. And that also applies on the other side as well when you have the listing optimization, because if you inflate your features too much and it's, a little bit too much, over promising on your product, when customers receive those products, that encourages them to return and they're not as satisfied. So it makes a huge difference on returns and bad reviews. And it's very easy to do that on your first order. I know a lot of sellers that I've spoken to, especially when they're launching their business, they're like, hey, it's my first order, it's a trial run, I'm testing it out, I'm testing the market. And if you don't test the market and do it the right way, the market's never going to respond to you. Because you can't cut corners, especially on the first product and on the first order.
It's absolutely true. So let's talk about that domino effect in a little bit. You put this wonderful slide together, so why don't you talk through this for us?
Yeah, definitely. So, a lot of customers, they're like, hey, if I have a 1% defect rate or 2% defect rate, it's fine. And this is something we see on inspections, and this is kind of where we pull this data from. So a lot of customers, when they do inspections, they're like, hey, I'm going to inspect 30, 40, 50 units out of 1,000. It should be good enough. And try to cut costs on inspections. Now, the thing is that you can use the level system on AQL, which is where you want to start. You have level 1, level 2, level 3. But say, for example, you have 1,000 units and you want to test 80 units. There's kind of two ways to look at it. First, with the level system, which is a little bit more complex, it's a statistical model, which I'll kind of dive into a little bit later on how that works and how that can influence your defect rate and your product reviews. But if you're only testing 80 products and you're testing for a 1% defect rate, they're not going to be able to find products, because if you have 1 in 100 that are defective and you only test 80, it's a pretty decent chance you don't find that one defective unit when you check 80 units. So it's really important to really check the products and make sure you're controlling for a defect rate. And this here right here is an example of why that's important. So if you have 1,000 products that are shipped and 10 are bad, you have 10 faulty products in your customer's hands, 1% of your buyers are going to end up leaving a review. So if you have 1,000 products and you might end up with 10 positive reviews, but those 10 faulty products on a 1% defect rate are enough to end up with 8 to 10 negative reviews from those same 10 positive reviews. So if 40, 50% of your reviews are coming from unsatisfied buyers, your star rating on Amazon is going to be incredibly low. Now, Amazon does prioritize positive reviews and weigh them a little bit more heavily, from what I'm aware, than negative reviews, just because they're a lot more common to get negative reviews than positive reviews. But even then, if 50% of reviews are 3-star or under, and 50% of reviews are 4 to 5 stars, it's going to balance out to a really low product rating, and that can significantly influence and affect your brand.
Well, and now there's the added complication of upvotes and downvotes on reviews too. So that gives weight. So, and that I see that being abused all the time, but I also see that, you've got that negative review and somebody might not go and leave another negative review, but they thumbs up that negative review because that happened to them too. And then that gives that negative review more weight as well.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, it's actually really interesting, because one of the products that I sold personally, and actually some of our competitors in the electronics industry, if you take a look at that, like you go look at electronic products and things like that, you'll notice that certain products, when you go to their listing and you go to their reviews, you'll find like a negative review all the way at the top. And that's the first review people see, because people upvoted the helpful tag so many times. And when they do that and they push a negative review at the front, I have seen comments physically on those reviews saying, hey, because I commented, because of this review, I decided not to purchase the product, just because of one negative review and that helpful.
Well, and anytime someone comments on it, it also boosts it a little bit too. So
Exactly.
and I think that, so you're talking about a 1% defect rate within your products, right? So you're trying, if you're shooting for a 1 to 2% defect rate with your actual manufacturing, your actual products. But if you think about Amazon's own metrics, it's not analogous to your product defect rate, but your order defect rate has to be better than, it has to be less than 1%, or you can lose your wholesaler account. So if you think about things the way that Amazon thinks about things, you really can't afford for any of your products to be bad, because one bad product out of a whole batch leads to one bad review, and then it's all downhill from there. I don't know if it's possible to get 100% of like your products perfect, but I think that probably the point of what you do and the point of this business you've created is to get as close to that as possible so that you're minimizing this negative effect.
Exactly. And there's a lot of ways to do that, which, we'll jump into. Like, you don't have to check, if you have 1,000 units, you don't have to check all 1,000 units, and you can control that defect rate pretty significantly. But it's really important to note that, when you're working on the supply chain side of things, from our perspective, most supply chain companies are built for brick and mortar sellers, and brick and mortar sellers have it very differently, because if you have a 2, 3, 4% defect rate, that's controlled in brick and mortar. And you end up with a 2, 3% defect rate in brick and mortar. Customers return your products, they go to the store will give them an exchange, the customer experience is controlled, and they're also not leaving public feedback about their negative experiences because there's no forum to do that. No one's going to seek out, Reddit forum and complain about how they got one defective unit in a gas station or something like that, or Walmart. So it makes a huge difference. And that's where, when a lot of customers look at supply chain strategies and supply chain management strategies, they need to take a very different approach when it comes to those supply chain strategies for running an e-commerce store, especially when you're a marketplace seller. You're selling on a platform like Amazon or Walmart. You're a marketplace seller. It's much more controlled, and you have to be very, very careful. If you're selling on your own website, you don't have to control it as much. You have a little bit more flexibility, per se, even more flexibility than brick and mortar. But you're still making it very easy for customers to leave reviews on your Facebook page and things like that, because you're a digital brand. You're already everywhere, and it's very easy to find your social profiles if you're doing your marketing right. So there's an impact there. But marketplace sellers really have it the hardest because of those negative reviews, and because of those returns, and because of those metrics that those marketplaces like Amazon track and put on you. It makes a huge difference in the way the marketplace operates and how your business needs to run. So all the supply chain advice you can get online is really good, but you want to always do things on the side of caution, and doing things a lot tighter than what you would expect from the advice you get online. And that applies to really anything on the supply chain side that we've seen for marketplace sellers, whether it's negotiations. Your pricing is a lot more a lot harder because it's a lot more price competitive online. So buying orders, buying products in China or wherever you're buying them at, wherever you're sourcing, you need to be more careful there. You need to be more careful with your supply chain, through quality control, they're operating. You want to get products to the customers as fast as possible. So supply chain needs to be a huge focus for e-commerce brands. And I've noticed brands that do focus and prioritize supply chain, it reflects throughout their entire business. Brands that only have the branding side or only have the marketing side working, they face a lot of problems, because no matter how good of a marketer you are, if you have your products are going out of stock, you have problems on your supply chain, you can't operate an e-commerce business successfully.
That's absolutely the truth.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting slide as far as like general supply chain management. So a lot of customers, one of the things that they do is they don't keep enough inventory in stock, and they don't manage their inventory turns, and that's difficult. It's definitely difficult. When you have a lot of different SKUs, you have a lot of different products, it's difficult to do that. But if inventory runs out early, or your manufacturing time is slow and behind, and this was really apparent during COVID. So as soon as COVID hit, a lot of customers had their suppliers shut down. So last year, January, February, March, suppliers were pretty much entirely shut down because of COVID. So in April, May, when things started opening up, orders were months behind, and a lot of customers ran out of stock. I was getting calls left, right, and center from friends asking me about issues in China, supply chain, asking me if there's anything that can be done. And I was hearing businesses, running out of revenues going down by 90%, and not even because of COVID specifically, because e-commerce actually helped COVID, or COVID helped e-commerce quite a bit, but more so because they're running out of stock. And the brands that really came out of that and won were the brands that had effective supply chain management and took into account, the chance of those problems. Obviously, pandemic is not something that a lot of people can expect. So it's not something that, every brand can be really, really good about. But, manufacturing, especially as a small to medium business, which a lot of e-commerce sellers are, 95% of e-com sellers are small to medium enterprises. When you're working with a supplier that produces, hundreds of thousands of units a month, and you're, 10,000, 5,000, a few thousand units of their order capacity, you're not really a big priority, no matter how much, customer relationship they have with you. So if you have issues, you have problems with the supply chain, they have a bigger order, they're going to prioritize that order over your order. And delays and, manufacturing timelines, things like that, they're frequently moving, they're frequently changing, and it's very difficult to get that control as an e-commerce business. Especially with your quality control demands, especially with all the demands that you have in place. So manufacturing can be delayed at essentially any time, and it can have problems if you have quality control problems. We've had a lot of customers reach out to us, and they're in an absolute rush. So they say, hey, I'm going to do my inspection on Monday, and I'm going to arrange my shipping on Tuesday. And they don't even get the report sometimes until the product is already on the way to the port, and they've already sent payment, they've already lost leverage, and it creates a lot of issues. So it's incredibly important that supply chain is prioritized there, because if you have shipping times and getting it to the warehouse is more time. If it's delayed, if there's any delays in the process, there's so many points of contact in the process. If there's delays, you can lose the buy box, you can lose your listing. If you have no active sellers on your listing, you're not running ads, your rankings can impact, your reviews can impact as well. So a lot of times, especially when you're launching a product, if you do have negative reviews, it's due to the product breaking or problems with the product. A lot of those come 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 180 days out. You can have negative reviews coming out from a sale 6 months later. And when your product goes out of stock, you're not only losing search relevancy losses, you're not only losing your optimization on the listing, your ads performance, and you have to reset that, you are also affecting your product reviews. Because if you're out of stock for 3-4 months and you had a bad order or you had some problems with your product, now all of a sudden for 3-4 months, you're only getting negative reviews from past sales. You're not getting positive reviews from new sales. So now your positive review to negative review ratio is completely off. So it makes a huge difference that can carry down and waterfall over several months. And it just basically waterfalls into a bigger and bigger and bigger issue the more supply chain problems you have. And quality control is just one component of that.
That's absolutely true. We do have a couple of questions. So I'm going to stop sharing and we can do questions for a little while. The magic of GoToWebinar. So I know the answer to this one. Kim says, is it true that Amazon removed the comment feature under a review? I recently logged in to comment in response to a review, but couldn't find the leave a reply button box anymore. Do you have any advice for a seller who wants to reply to customers' reviews? Thank you. We did a webinar with Becky Trowbridge from Ecom Engine not too long ago, and unfortunately that feature has been removed. And that used to be the go-to, like, oh, what do I do if I get a bad review? The only thing you could do was comment on it, so that people who are scrolling through reviews, like Sojo says he does, and if you see that negative review, but you see the seller say, oh, this happened because of this, and this is how I resolved it, then that kind of restores that customer trust. But unfortunately, Amazon did remove that feature, and I don't know of any plans to bring it back. So right now, you don't really have a lot of options when it comes to responding to reviews, but you can look at your reviews to see if there's something you need to change about your listing, to see if you're targeting the wrong keywords, to see if you do have a product quality issue, if you've got an inventory issue, anything like that. Your reviews can give you insight into that, but unfortunately, communicating with those people, Amazon has made that extremely difficult.
Yeah, one of the things we've seen really work really well is investing in branding. And that's another corner you can really cut, especially when you're launching a business. Like, hey, I don't need a website, I don't need a Facebook profile, I don't need a Twitter profile. My customer support email can just be through Amazon, contact the seller. I don't really need an email, things like that. And I don't need a website. A lot of times you don't need a website for selling products, but you want a website for customers to reach you, because those same customers that leave a review, and you'd be surprised, a decent portion of them would actually rather contact your company and ask for you to resolve that before they leave that negative review. But if you make it very difficult to reach out and to resolve that issue, or you don't tell customers there is a team behind that, then it makes it very difficult. So what most Amazon sellers do, or Amazon buyers, is they go through the Amazon platform because they're used to Amazon branding, the Amazon systems. But if you have in your packaging, and a lot of very successful Amazon brands do this, where it's like just a very simple thing. It could be like a happy and not happy cart. There's a brand, Anchor, that does this really, really well. If you've ever bought an Anchor product on Amazon, where you open up the box and it's like this little small card. One side it says happy. You open it up and it says you're happy. Leave a review. Tell our team thank you. Follow us on socials. Flip the card over. It says not happy. You open it up and it says, okay, hey, we're sorry you're not happy. Here's our support email. Here's our phone number. Here's our contact info. Please reach out to us and we'll make it right. And we added a similar thing to a lot of our products, and that significantly changed our negative review rates because we had customers reaching out to us first and saying, hey, help us resolve this issue because we care about it, kind of thing, right? So creating that brand feel, in the packaging, in the opening of the package, as well as having those resources available online. If they search up your brand on Google, they can find your Facebook page to have different ways of contacting you, making it as easy for the buyer to reach out to you if there is an issue, and telling them that you can reach out to us. We want to help you. We want to fix your problems. We want you to be happy with the product. Investing there makes a huge difference, especially early on, because that sets the stage for the rest of the experience. You also have those customers you can upsell to, once they have that support experience with you and whatnot.
Sure. Although per the last couple of years of policy with Amazon, you really shouldn't have an either or, like leave a review or contact us. You should pick, because Amazon has gotten pretty crackdowny about product reviews on inserts. So I think that branding in an item is absolutely essential, and giving customers a way to reach out to you is actually more important than using that touch point to ask for a review. That's just my personal opinion, based on what I've seen in the industry, based on the amount of sellers I've seen get suspended for reviews abuse, and the horror stories I've heard from Chris McCabe. But
Yeah.
giving that kind, well, and Amazon doesn't really give you a lot of ways to let your customers know how to reach you, right? It's a little better than it used to be, because now there's Amazon profiles and all that kind of stuff where you can actually put your website on there. I don't know how long they're going to keep that,
Yeah.
but any opportunity you have to get your name and contact information in front of, your brand name and your contact information in front of your customers is a great idea, because it gives you the opportunity to actually understand what your customers want.
I think Transparency actually announced a feature on that super recently, like in the last day or two, about how they're actually implementing some branding options if you're enrolled in the Transparency program with Amazon.
Yeah, I think, some Sal asked what was Amazon's reason for removing the option for sellers to comment on a review, and it would seem like it's just a mean thing they did, right? It seems like it's just, there's no rhyme or reason to it, and they're just trying to make it more difficult for you. But that's not actually the case. That was actually getting abused pretty bad, I think. And I think that Amazon internally said something about it was just hard to manage. I don't think it was a wahaha kind of thing, if that makes any sense. And I do think Amazon's trying to come up with other things to help you market your brand, help you define your brand, and make it stand out on the platform. It's not fast enough, I don't think, for you guys, but they are trying, I think. We did have a question about, Gary asked that they have customers that choose defective on the return reason, but the comments say it was too small or they didn't like the fabric. So the reason for the return isn't really a defective product, but does this still have a negative effect on their account?
Yes, that's a really good question. So it depends on kind of what kind of feedback it is. So if it's like seller feedback, I think it has a much bigger impact on your account than like product reviews. But generally, when it comes to returns and things like that, like even if the customer damages the product and returns it, you're still kind of responsible for it. It's like a customer damaged unit. So at the end of the day, that just, if they're reporting as too small or other features, that just kind of falls into the other 80% bucket, which is you want to make sure the listing is as accurate as possible in describing the product to prevent those issues from happening. Because customers return the products because they don't like the products at the end of the day, whether they're defective, they still don't like it, and whether it's not described, they don't like it. So the goal is to make customers like the product as much as possible by making sure you're getting the right customers to buy, and you're making sure that they're involved in the process and they know what they're buying.
Definitely. We have a listing optimization question from Jackie. keyword packing your listing content in an attempt to optimize your listing when you're just getting off the ground? Is it more important to pack in keywords to please the machines than it is to write for the customer experience? We had someone keyword stuffing our content, and the strategy has been tanking our grammar and readability, but the strategy appears to be working. It just looks bad to the human eye. What's the balance to strike? I actually did a webinar last week with Pauline from Zentail, and they're all about like multi-platform listings. And she would say that you absolutely need to write to the customer experience and you need to be responsible with your keywords. So keyword stuffing is usually, I mean, it's definitely not a good idea, and it might work for a little while, but in the long run, it's not going to work because it's all about the customer experience. So I don't know if you've got a differing opinion about that, but I think that I would err on the side of readability. Still try to strategically use keywords as much as you can without sacrificing readability and grammar.
Yeah, definitely. I think readability is huge, and one of the reasons that my brand previously was able to grow so quickly in pretty much the most saturated industry on Amazon, which is consumer electronics, was because our marketing, we didn't keyword stuff. We tried to here and there. It was really about striking a balance, but I think readability is very, very important because it establishes that brand feel, and it goes back into the branding bucket of like, hey, you want a tone of voice, you want to feel. You want something that customers can align to, because at the end of the day, the question is, if you're aiming to even sell your business long term, you want to exit, you want to hire multiples, you want to build a brand behind your products. You don't want to just be another Amazon seller with a no-name brand. So having that tone of voice, having that readability, it creates trust, especially when you're competing with a lot of international sellers, especially on the marketing side. Notice a lot of listings are, in broken English or a little bit difficult. So having a English listing in native English that, really is readable adds a lot of trust for buyers, because at the end of the day, they want to know if they have a problem with the product, they're going to receive support that, they like, and, they can understand. So having that readability is very, very important, and it creates trust with the customers, because once they've reached your product page and they're already sold on your product, the question is now, Amazon buyers are already ready to buy. The question is, okay, which product do I want to buy for features? And then do I like the brand that I'm buying it from? So it's kind of two things: is features and trust. And if you err on the side of readability, you can aim, to make sure you convey the features appropriately and also gain that trust. Otherwise, it can help you with rankings potentially, but your conversion rate might drop.
Great. We're going to have one more question, and then I want to talk about why your inspections are failing, because I feel like we should get back to that before we end, and we're past 1:30. The time is just flying by. But Mary Beth says that Amazon updated their communication policy that states you're only permitted to communicate with customers via their messaging system. Is a product insert directing the customer to an email or phone number outside of Amazon considered a violation of that communication rule? That's a very, very good question. And it's kind of iffy. There was a great web retailer article not too long ago about product inserts, and I will include that on the show notes recap that I send out. But Amazon doesn't have a specific policy about product inserts, but other communication policies do impact what you can put on a product insert. You're definitely not allowed to ask for a positive review, and you're not supposed to push people to your own website or circumvent the Amazon sales process at all. So some things that I've seen people get in trouble for are, for instance, saying, okay, thanks for buying this product, and here's a 20% off coupon to go buy our product from our website. That would be considered a circumventing Amazon sales process, taking the customer away from Amazon. Just like within buyer seller messaging, why you weren't allowed to link somewhere else, because they don't want you to take your customers away from Amazon. So if you try to do that on a product insert, it can get you in trouble. I think that if you've got something in there that's got your email address on it, I don't think that that's a clear violation of policy, but you would need to use your best judgment, talk to some professionals, talk to some people that have done that before, and definitely make sure that there's nothing that you're doing that's violating Amazon's what we used to call TOS, but now it's seller policies and procedures or something. But
Definitely. And I'd also add real quick in terms of that. So a lot of products, actually on a supply chain perspective, due to product certifications or legal requirements, things like that, they have a requirement to display their contact information on the packaging or inside the packaging, maybe with a warranty notice with guidelines with certification notices, things like that. So, and just kind of like, this is a super gray area. So it's very difficult to, give a very like straightforward answer. But in a general sense, I don't believe Amazon can really restrict your ability to provide contact information at the very least, just because, there are legal reasons behind that as well, potentially. So in a general sense, like, erring on the side of caution, just providing, hey, if you had a bad experience, here's our support phone number, here's our email address, for example. I wouldn't think that's out of policy, but, obviously tread at your own caution and, talk with sellers in the space, talk with people there, because it is a gray area. But, there are also legal bases and things like that. And a lot of larger brands do that, but Amazon hasn't cracked down on them. But, that's changing too. Like there's a huge crackdown just last week of a lot of large, sellers that were actually buying reviews in kind of weird ways through like review groups and stuff like that. And previously that were not, cracked down.
There was a great podcast that I'll link to about that too, that Jason Boyce did with GeekWire and Jeff Cohen from Seller Labs talking about that. So I'll link to that in the show notes for you guys too, because that was big news and a really huge step in the right direction in terms of all these times that we see people saying, gee, I've launched a product, or my products existed on Amazon for 2 years, but this other competing product just launched and all of a sudden it has 1,000 reviews. That's how that's happening. That's not happening through any organic source whatsoever. That's happening because somebody's gaming the system. So it's really nice to see Amazon picking up on that and making sure that those bad actors are not allowed to do that anymore, because it messes up the entire thing, doesn't it? It messes up the entire marketplace when something gets like conflated reviews like that. But let's talk a little bit more about inspections before we run out of time, and y'all continue to put your questions in the questions box and we will get right back to you.
Definitely. So one of the biggest things that we see on the quality control side is a lot of brands, feel like they're taking the right steps, right? They're doing inspections on every single order. I was doing inspections on every single order, and I was like, okay, we're going to control our product quality. We're going to make sure things are going right. And I did research into the quality control side of things for the last 4 or 5 years, and actually a little bit longer, like 5, 6 years at this point. And what I learned throughout my journey was that, there's kind of like four main reasons why product quality control, specifically with inspections, fail. When I say fail, I don't mean your inspection is failing. I mean like your inspection is not effective. So you're getting past inspections, or you're not really finding problems on the China side or wherever you're manufacturing when you're doing your inspections. You're sending your products to your customers and you're still ending up with defects, negative reviews, and things like that. And there are a couple of technical pieces that go into this, which we'll jump into. But these are kind of the four main reasons, which is, first of all, every product is really unique. So, a lot of people have this, understanding that like, hey, an inspection company, I'm going to go send them, I'm going to tell them, hey, I have a comb. They get what it is. It's a comb. They should know what it is, but, they should know how to inspect it. But there's a huge variance in combs. You can go to a dollar store, get a comb for 25 cents, a dollar, super flimsy, really cheap. Then you can go on Amazon, you can get a comb for $15. It's made out of wood. It's super, stiff, very, very nice to touch, very smooth. It's a completely different product, and it's still a comb. Every product is unique, but the inspection is not checking the right things. Number two is that the inspection only looks at the product visually, even if it's the simple ones. So a lot of customers are like, hey, my inspection is super simple. I just need an inspector to go there, look at the products. If it look good, inspection passes. And that can be great if you're working on like a decorative item, but even a decorative item, needs to survive shipping. It needs to survive packaging. It needs to get to the customer in one piece. So if that decorative item is breaking, or that's, you touch it and the paint is coming off, things like that, if someone spills a little bit of water on it, and or has like a wet hand because they just touched a glass of water and they touched this decorative item and the paint comes off, that decorative item is going to get bad reviews. So even the most simple products have tests. Take into account like a wooden shelf. You have a wooden shelf, you put it up on the wall. It's cool, it's wood, right? But a wooden shelf has to hold enough weight. You know what I mean? So if you put 20 pounds of weight and it breaks, then the wooden shelf is kind of useless. No one's going to want to buy it because they're going to just be like, I can't put anything on it. It's just breaking. And so even the most simple products have tests. Like I'll give you another example, which is that pasta strainer. So, we had a customer with a pasta strainer. I think there was something between like 9 to 12, something like that, product tests for the pasta strainer. You want to test the water. You want to make sure that the logo is not coming off. One like very common test is to take like rubbing alcohol and like rub it over the logo, rub it over the paint, put a little bit of chemical there. The paint is actually settled, that the polish is settled on the product. the rubbing alcohol should not remove anything. Things like that, very simple tests, but that check the product quality. Even the most simple products have those checks. And the thing is that if you're not checking for those problems, and it's not just the good or the bad, or it's not just the bad. So, if you go look on other people's listings, like, hey, the paint is coming off, and you put that in inspection guidelines and your quality control procedures, hey, I want to test for bad paint. If you're only testing for the bad, if something good turns bad, you're not going to know because you're not testing for the good. So, if you don't have a lot of complaints in the industry about, your logo coming off with rubbing alcohol, and you say, okay, I'm not going to do this test. If you do have that problem on the product and it happens in the future, you're never going to know because you're not doing that test. So it's very important to make sure that you're doing the right tests. And even the most simple products have product tests, and those product tests can make a big difference. Now, they don't have to be done on all the units. There are some that do, that need to be done on all the units, which are called function tests generally. But in a general sense, even the most simple products have product tests that need to be done on a decent number of units. The third thing is that the inspection isn't testing a statistically significant quantity. Now, this is super, super big. This is where we're going to jump in a little bit deeper in the next slide, which is sample sizes. But it makes a big difference when you're testing a statistical sample size. So, say for example, you have an electronic product like a blender, and you want to plug in the blender, make sure the blender works. Now, if you have 1,000 units and you plug in 10 units, you've tested for about a 10% defect rate. So you can have a past inspection and test all 10 units and say, yep, sounds good, and still end up with 10% of your products defective, because there's a pretty good chance that, 1 in 10 units are, still going to be defective because you're not testing enough units. And so a really simple way of doing that is just divide 1 over the number of units you test. So if you do 1 over 100, you're testing for about a 1% defect rate. And if you're doing 1 out of 10, you're testing for a 10% defect rate. Because if you, you test 10 units and, there's the 11th unit is the defective one, you could very easily have a 10% defect rate and not be aware and still get a passed inspection. So that's super, super important. And what happens with the inspection process is that a lot of inspection companies and people, when they do their inspections, they will do their function tests or their product tests on only like 1, 2, 3 units. And a lot of inspection companies, they publish this on their website, where you can literally go on their website. They're like, yeah, we only test 3 units for function. And if you don't have the right tests, because your product is unique and you've not specified how to properly test your product to those inspection companies, and number 2, they're only testing 1, 2, 3 units, that's not really statistically significant, you can end up with a passed inspection every single order, which is what we ended up with, and still ending up with defective products, a huge negative review rate, huge return rate, huge warranty replacement rate, and things like that. And the last, fourth bucket is that the inspection is not conducted right. For example, poor training. So if your inspector is going to the factory and they're not properly conducting the inspection, there's no accountability, there's no processes to monitor the inspection. And keep in mind that when you're working with any other country, like whether it's China, whether it's India, there's always going to be communication issues. So if you go and talk to China, I mean, you can go on the Facebook group and you can see communication screenshots between suppliers and buyers communicating. It's all over the internet, all over these Facebook groups, and they're like, hey, why doesn't my supplier understand this? This is very simple. And a lot of those communications are in broken English and they're not very clear, and people are really confused. So if you have that kind of confusion, just on with your supplier, imagine what kind of confusion your inspector might have if you tell them, hey, I want you to test something in this particular way. You go send it to a company in China, they have their inspector go out to the factory, inspector's reading a specification, they're like, well, I think this means this, and then they go do the test, they go do the inspection wrong, and then you end up with a passed inspection because the inspection was not conducted right. And or say, for example, the inspector will go to the factory and they just are not trained properly in general. So instead of picking units out of multiple cartons and randomly sampling, they just ask the factory, hey, which products can I inspect? I need 100 units, and let the factory give them the products. Then the whole inspection is ineffective. So it makes a huge difference. And a lot of people have this misunderstanding that inspections are a commodity. And that's a huge difference. Inspections are not really a commodity, it's a service. So similar to branding, similar to design, similar to advertising management, things like that, there's a huge difference between different companies and the way and the processes they operate. And that can control how well they work. So, hiring Metrics and working with Liz to manage PPC is going to be a very different experience from hiring a VA on Upwork and ending up with, maybe a worse service. So inspections, similar to manufacturing, it's not a commodity, and that's very, very important to remember. There's a lot that goes into the inspection, goes into the service, and a lot that goes into the setup as well on your end. That's very important to make sure that inspection is effective. And you can jump over to the next slide, which is sample sizes. And this kind of walks you through a little bit of what I said. So the biggest spec that comes down to inspections is a statistical model called ISO 28591. And ISO 28591 was invented originally for the military. And ISO stands for International Organization of Standards. It should be iOS, but I guess Apple already took that trademark, so they were like, okay, we'll do ISO. And they essentially set out 3 levels, which is level 1, level 2, and level 3. Now, these levels can vary pretty significantly. So, when it comes to these percentages, these are kind of estimated for 1,000 units. But a lot of people have this idea like, hey, should I test 10% of my units or 20% of my units? And that's actually the wrong way to look at it. You want to look at it from the perspective of, how many units do I need to check to have a statistically significant result, less so of how many units on a percentage should I test of the entire order. So if you have like 10 units and you test 10% of the product, you test one product, that's not really going to be a statistically significant result. So one product could be great and your 8 other products in that could be defective. If you have 100 products and you test 10% of the units, kind of the same thing. You're testing 1 out of 10, you can still have a bunch of defects. You can't really estimate for that. So what ISO 28591 basically looks at is what is the least number of units you can test while still being statistically significant. And level 1 is the lowest statistical level quantity, and level 3 is the highest. And that's generally what we use as a baseline for inspections. And that's what you want to use as a baseline for inspections as well. So for 1,000 units, level 1 is 32, pretty low, but it's statistically significant. Level 2 is 80, and level 3 is 125. Now, the next thing you want to look at is, based on a defect control rate, if you're trying to account for a 1% defect rate or a 2% defect rate, you need to test enough units in whatever level you choose, or even go above and beyond that to make sure that you're testing for that appropriate defect rate. So for example, if you're testing, function and you want to make sure at least 99% of your products are functional, you want to test at least 100 units. If you want to make sure that 99.5% of your products are functional, you want to test at least 200 units, whether you have 1,000 units, 2,000 units, whatever, that's kind of your baseline minimum. So that's the first way of approaching it on sample sizes. The next thing that a lot of people need to really think about comes down to product tests and visual inspection. There are sample sizes for each individual product test, as well as the visual inspection on a whole. So an inspection essentially consists of, first of all, visual inspection, which is going in, checking the products, making sure everything looks good, uniformity, things like that. And the second part of that is product tests, which are individual product tests. I'm plugging in the product, I'm testing the product for an individual function, doing wear and tear tests, maybe a safety test, something like that. These all have their own sample size. So like function tests generally should be done on all of the products that you test in the visual inspection. And again, a very statistical level of quantity. And then safety tests can be done on a smaller number of units, and then wear and tear tests generally leave the product destroyed. So you might want to even break a couple of units during the inspection process. So those are generally done on just a handful of units, maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe even 5. Really just depends on your product and your risk tolerance. So it's super important to kind of look at the sample sizes for the inspection, because no matter how good your inspection company is and how effective you set up your inspection, you set up your product test, if your sample sizes are ineffective, then you can still end up with past inspections and defective products. So a lot of customers understand, process of the inspection and setting up inspection. I'm sure you guys understand how that works in a general sense, but sample sizes is I think the most confusing aspect. And this is super important because when you're working on quality control and you're working on these things, it's not just your product listing, it's also your future business valuation. So if you're trying to sell your business in 3, 4, 5 years, and you talk to roll-ups, you talk to other companies and buyers in the space, they use quality control and bad product quality as a leverage to lower multiples in your sale. And that can happen even years out. So if they notice quality control problems on your reviews or your seller feedback, even a year ago, 2 years ago, it can affect your valuations, for years in the future, because if it happened once, it can happen again. And that means the processes are not in place, or the product is maybe a little bit too complex. And a lot of roll-ups and buyers shy away from those kind of products and those kind of operations. So adding that trust, adding that accountability, and making sure those processes are in place and everything is smooth, that's going to dramatically increase the number of buyers that are interested, and also the number of the valuation and the multiples you're going to get years going down the line.
That's a great point. So you do have a special offer for attendees and registrants of this webinar.
Yeah, definitely. So if you scan this QR code or just go to our website, motley.com, and just hit the Get Started button, just mention you found us through our Metrics webinar, and we'll be able to give you a $25 discount on our first inspection, on your first inspection. So you can just go to our website, motley.com, just mention Metrics and fill out the Get Started form or scan the QR code to get that.
Okay, and I just popped that into the chat for everybody too. All right, let's see if we have any questions. It doesn't look like we have any questions. Earlier, when I was talking about keyword research, proper keyword usage, making sure that, and when Sajal was talking about targeting the wrong keywords in advertising, and we had all of that talk, I'm really excited because our upcoming Flywheel 2.0 platform has market intelligence data that we're pulling in from Amazon and from Walmart to help you understand your competition, understand your share of voice, and understand what you might be doing right in your listing, what you might be doing wrong in your listing, understand what kind of keywords you should be using in your listings, understand what kind of keywords you should be targeting in your ads. So it's super, we've just seen such great results from the users that are using it. So I encourage you to sign up for early access to Flywheel 2.0 if you're interested in looking at that kind of data with your own account. And that's just takeometrics.com. And I will pop the link into the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this time, if I can figure out how to do that. And we'll see if we have any final questions from anybody. Well, I think that was a ton of great information. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for joining me. It's been a while since we worked together, but it's great to see you. He's broadcasting from, where are you right now?
Yeah, so I'm in Miami right now. It's all sunny, blue skies right outside.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, it's just a muggy 70 something here in Richmond, Virginia. But go enjoy the beach. And everybody, thanks for choosing to attend another Tuesday webinar with Takeometrics. If you've got any questions, I'm Elle Downing at takeometrics.com. The recording will be coming out to you along with the show notes, the deck, and anything else we mentioned. We'll see you at the next one. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.